This is lesson 7-1 called Slopes of Parallel and Perpendicular Lines. So in the first opening exercise, we have this equation of a line, okay? Well, we don't have the equation yet. They're just drawing the line for you. And then they're asking us a couple questions down below. So the first question, part A, says, what are the coordinates of the y-intercept? So the y-intercept is where it's going to intersect the y-axis. So right here would be where my y-intercept is. So we'll just label that. So when it says what are the coordinates, well, that's the coordinate 0, -3. Okay, so then it says what's the slope of the line. So over here, I'm just going to kind of review what slope is because this entire unit is coordinate geometry, so we're going to be doing a lot with slope. So slope is equal to rise over run. Or you can think about it as the change in y over the change in x. So when you have a standard equation for a line, so y equals mx plus b, in that formula, your m is representing your slope. Your b, or whatever is being added or subtracted at the end, is what your y-intercept is. Okay, just a little bit of review on that. So when it says what's the slope, the easiest way to do it is to start here, find 2 points that you know exist on the line. So say, for example, I picked this one. And you're just counting from here to here, from left to right, how much up or down are you going over how much left or right you're going. So I'm going up 2, right 1. So that means my slope, if it's rise over run, it's rising up 2 and right 1. So your slope would just be 2. Okay, so then it says write the equation of the line. Well, now that we know that this is our standard form for a line, we have everything we need. We have our y-intercept, that's going to be at -3, and then we have our slope of 2. So in a normal equation, you just have a standard x and y. So we're going to write y is equal to our 2x minus 3. Okay, and that's my equation for this line that's drawn. Now, down here it says on the grid above, draw a line that would be parallel to the given line. Okay, so if I go back up to the graph. Now, we can pick any point we want. I'm just going to pick one. Okay, so say I pick going through right here at 0, 3. And then if I do it, I'm going to kind of keep something the same. The thing that's going to stay the same is my slope. So I'm going up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. And if you draw your line in with a ruler, there we go. Now I can draw infinitely many parallel lines, okay? Like I could go here, 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 anywhere, okay? So I just kind of picked one. So part E at the bottom says to write the equation of that line. Now, I obviously just picked a random line, but if I were to pick this as my new line, my new y-intercept is going to be right here that's at a +3, and my slope didn't change. So if I go down here, if I wanted to write an equation of that line that I just drew in there, I'm going to say y equals 2x, right? Because my slope is still 2, but now I'm going to say +3. So if you notice, when lines are parallel, they end up having the same slope. Okay, so if you guys turn the page, we're going to kind of take a look at that next. Okay. So right here, it kind of says parallel lines. So parallel lines are lines that have equal slopes. So in other words, if you guys look at this example, both of these lines are parallel, meaning they run in the same direction. They're the same distance apart, and they're never going to intersect. They both have a slope of 3. Okay, so that's kind of important for what the homework looks like. So then if we go to perpendicular lines down here at the bottom, this might be something that's new to you guys that you haven't seen yet. So what perpendicular lines are, okay, is they are lines that have what's called negative reciprocal slopes. So a negative reciprocal slope, just so you guys know what it is if you look at, say, 3, okay, so if you look at 3, and if you were to write 3 as a fraction, you would put it over 1, right? So that's another way to say 3. So a negative reciprocal is when you flip the fraction and then change the sign. So this is technically a positive. So the new negative reciprocal would be a negative a third. Okay, so that's where they're getting negative 1/3 from. So if I just do a couple examples with you guys as practice. So say I ask for the negative reciprocal to -5. Okay, -5 is really -5/1. So then you would flip it. And then since it's a negative, your answer would be just a positive 1/5. Okay, so say I asked for the negative reciprocal to 1, right? Another way to write 1 is just 1/1. So if you wanted the negative reciprocal, you would flip that fraction and then negate it. So the reciprocal of 1 is just -1. Okay, and I can go on and on and on. Say I pick, here's another one, say 3/4. The negative reciprocal to that would be -4/3. Okay, so that's all negative reciprocals are, but that's how you get the lines to be perpendicular or form a right angle right here, is when they have these negative reciprocal slopes, that's going to give you perpendicular lines. Okay, so then if we turn the page, let's do some examples together. So for example 1, it says, what is the slope of the line parallel to this equation? So again, you guys have to remember that slope is not the x. The x isn't included. It's the number in front of x. So if we want the slope of a line parallel to it, it is the same slope. Okay? Meaning the slope didn't change. So the answer to the first one is just 5. Okay? There's no work or anything. It's just that would be the slope of a line parallel to it. So then if we look at number 2, it says, what's the slope of a line parallel to this one? Now, the only problem with this equation is you cannot find the slope unless it's in y equals mx plus b form. So the problem is this is not y equals something. So in order to do it, we have to solve this for y. So I would subtract 2x on both sides. And now I have it in my standard mx plus b form. So you want to probably put the x term in front and then the 9 at the end, just so that it looks like this format. So again, if I want it to be parallel to it, I want the slope to be the same. So your answer to that question would be -2. Okay, so then number 3, it says, what is the slope of the line perpendicular to the equation y equals 6x minus 10? So perpendicular means we want a negative reciprocal slope. So I'm just going to kind of yank out that 6. And think of it as, if I want the negative reciprocal, 6, another way to write it as a fraction is 6/1. And then you guys flip the fraction and then negate it. So if it's negative, it turns positive, positive turns negative. So it started positive, now it's going to be negative. So that would be my answer, is -1/6. Okay, so then we have number 4. So number 4 says, what is the slope of the line perpendicular to the equation 1/3 x plus y equals 4. So again, the problem that we have is that it's not in standard y equals mx plus b form. So we start by subtracting 1/3 x on both sides. So I have y is equal to -1/3 x plus 4. Okay, so now that it's in my standard form, this is my slope that I'm like examining. They want perpendicular this time. Okay, so these last two are both perpendicular. So over here, I'm just going to kind of write -1/3. So they're just asking what is the new slope of the line going to be of that equation. So do the negative reciprocal to that. So flip it and negate it. So it would be 3/1. Since it's negative, it turns positive. So in other words, my new slope would just be 3. Okay, so now let's kind of look at these are actually how they appear on the regions. So let's look at some multiple choice questions. So for number 5, it says, which of the following equations will be parallel to the equation y equals 8x plus 1? So in other words, the key, again, pay attention to whether it says parallel or perpendicular. So this one's saying parallel. So I want my slope to be an 8. So I'm going to go through each of these. Now, if you notice, all the equations are in standard a plus y equals mx plus b form. So you could do that very easily. So if I look at a first, I'll kind of carry it down here. The way to solve that for y is I would subtract 8x on both sides. So I would have y is equal to -8x plus 4. Okay, so then if I look, and so that's letter A. Okay, so then if I examine B, B, I'm going to have to do a couple things too, so I'm going to kind of carry the work down here. Okay, so in order to solve for Y, I'm going to have to, like, the rule of thumb is lock Y in and get rid of everything around it. So I want to get rid of that -8 first by subtracting it. So then I would have -16x minus 8 is 2y. So then to get y alone, since 2 is being multiplied to it, I would divide every single term by 2. So that would end up giving me -8x minus 4 is equal to y. Now, an equation just says scale, so you guys can flip the terms if you don't like how that looks. Like, just keep the signs with the terms. So in other words, make sure -8x is still -8x, -4, and then just kind of move the y to the other side. So this is that equation. So obviously it's not a +8, so that eliminates choices A and B. So now if we look at C, we have y minus 8x equals 8. So solving that for y, I would add 8x on both sides, and I would have y is equal to 8x plus 8. Remember, you cannot add these two terms together and tell me they're 16x. In order for it to be 16x, you would have to have 8x plus 8x, which it's not. So all this is you just adding the two terms down here. They're two separate types of terms. One has an x, one's a constant. So choice C is going to be my answer because it ends up having an 8 for a slope, and we wanted parallel. Okay, so then moving on to number 6. It says, which of the following equations will be perpendicular to the equation 5y is equal to 10x plus 25? So again, that's not in y equals form. So to get rid of that 5, you're going to divide every single individual term by 5. So you get y is equal to 2x plus 5. So then they want the one that's going to be perpendicular to this equation. So the slope of this equation is a 2. So I have to figure out the negative reciprocal to 2 over 1, which would be -1/2. So I'm looking for one of these equations to have -1/2 as my slope. So I'm just going to kind of go through one at a time and solve each of these for y so that I can take a look at their slope. So if I start with if I start with letter A, okay, I have 8x is equal to 4y plus 12. So I'm going to start by subtracting 12 on both sides. So I have 8x minus 12 is equal to 4y. Okay. I just don't like how this looks. Hold on a second. There we go. Okay, so then to get y alone, I'm going to divide every single term by a 4. So I get 2x minus 3 is equal to y. And again, if you don't like how this looks, just kind of flip the equation. So that does not, the slope here is a 2. That doesn't equal -1/2. So that's not going to be my answer. Now, before working out B, you can kind of tell the pattern that's going to happen when I go to try to solve that one. I would end up subtracting 8. I would just have -8 over here, and the slope is just going to end up giving you a -2. So I'm instead going to kind of start with C and work with one of these two, because that's probably going to be how I get my answer. So if I start with C, so I have 2y is equal to an x plus 2. I'm going to divide every single term by 2. Now, there's nothing written in front of x, but we assume it's a 1. So this is really 1/2 x plus 1. Okay, so don't forget that if there's nothing written, there's still a 1 there. So that's not the right slope. I need the negative sign. So the answer to this question is going to be D. And if you want to work it out real quick, it takes just a second. So it's the same process we just did, but when you divide by 2, you have -1 technically in front, 1/2 x plus 5. Okay, so that's why choice D is going to be my answer for that one. Okay, so then turn the page. 2 more. Okay, so then for number 7, which equation represents a line that is perpendicular to the line represented by 2x minus y equals 7? So I'm going to write that over here. 2x minus y equals 7. This is a minus sign right there. Okay, so first off, again, lock y in. Don't move y. Move everything on the same side as y. So get rid of the 2x first. So that's a positive 2x. So I'm going to subtract 2x on both sides. So then I have negative y is equal to negative 2x plus 7. And then I'm going to divide every single term by a negative 1. So I get y is equal to 2x minus 7. So the key with this one is they want to know, is it, like, give me a line that could be perpendicular to it. So you're looking at what's the negative reciprocal to 2. So the negative reciprocal to 2 would be negative a half. So the answer to this question, the one that has negative a half for a slope, is going to be choice 1. Now that was a Geometry Common Core Regions exam, so that's not very difficult, which is kind of cool. Okay, so then number 8. Now there's 3 of these on the homework, and you definitely have one on the test. So the quiz, I believe, for this week. So it says, are the following lines parallel, perpendicular, or neither? So they're giving you guys 2 lines right now to look at. So what you're going to do is you're going to set both of them equal to y. Then you're going to examine the slope and kind of make a judgment call. So if those slopes are the same, it's parallel. They are going to be parallel. If they're negative reciprocals, they're going to be perpendicular. Neither would not satisfy either of these. So an example for neither, I'll show you, would be like, for example, if you had 3/4 and 4/3. The problem with this is that one's not negative, okay? So in order for them to be negative reciprocals, one's got to be plus one, like minus sign. So this is an example of neither. So neither examples. Okay, so another example would be, let's see, if you had 1/2 and negative a half. So the problem with this is, like, yeah, one's positive, one's negative, but they're not reciprocals. So that's what neither is. It kind of doesn't satisfy either of them. Okay, so let's start with the first equation, x minus 6y equals 12. Okay, so solving that for y, again, lock y in. Don't move y, move everything next to y. So start by moving that x. So you can move that x by subtracting it on both sides. So you would have negative x, or negative 6y is equal to negative x plus 12. So then to get rid of that negative 6, you're going to divide negative 6 by everything. So you get y is equal to, now negative 1 divided by negative 6 just gives you a positive 1/6. By the way, you don't want, when you're dealing with equations and slopes, you don't want to make decimals. Decimals is going to make your life a lot harder. It's a lot easier to see rise over run with a fraction. Okay, so then we have x, and then this would be minus 2. We don't really care about what's happening with the y-intercept. We just care about slope. So we got the slope of the first line. Now we got to do it for the second line. So we have 6x plus y is equal to 6. So we would subtract 6x on both sides, and you would get y is equal to negative 6x plus 6. So if you guys examine the slopes, I have 1/6, and then I have negative 6. So as you can tell, these ones are negative reciprocals to each other. So the answer would be the lines are perpendicular. Okay, because their slopes are negative reciprocals. Okay, so now try the homework and then check your solutions online with my video. Okay, thanks.